Memori is an ugly invisible loner who was betrayed by an entire class of scumbags, so he became the strongest to get his revenge. It all started on the way to a school field trip. Memori was reliving his childhood trauma of being kicked around by his father because he was built like a soccer ball. When he woke up, he saw the Bakugo of the class named Oimata was annoying the class president Sogo. However, nobody else seemed to give a shit about harassment, not even their useless homeroom teacher who just slept the whole way. Memori tried to stand up to Oimata, but the bully reminded him that his existence was pointless. Just then, a jigshed named Takudo speaks up and tells Oimata to knock it off and hands Sogo back her book. Oimata asks him for some backup with roasting Memori, but Takudo says he's not interested in someone who's more invisible than air. Oimata hands Sogo her book back, then returns to his seat to pick on a new victim, Yasu. Apparently Yasu is even lower than Memori in the class social ranking, so he gets picked on just for breathing. Finally, the teacher tells Oimata to cut it out, so Yasu doesn't jump off a bridge, at least while he's still their teacher. Suddenly, a mysterious light shines around the bus and the entire class is transported to a strange room. There, a silver-haired woman introduces herself as Goddess Vicious and welcomes them as fighters of evil. She explains that they've been summoned to fight the evil Great Demon Emperor. It's been 200 years since the last set of heroes defeated the Demon Emperor, but he's been revived again, so they need their help. Some of the students think they might be dead, while some idiot girl wonders how she'll do her makeup now. Their deadbeat teacher tells them to calm down and listen to the goddess first, but he's actually just a simp with a suspicious browser history. Takudo asks what will happen if they refuse to fight the Demon Emperor, so the goddess tells them that she has no way of sending them back home. However, they can return if they obtain what's called the evil element, and the only way to do that is to either obtain the Demon Emperor's heart or absorb it when the Demon Emperor perishes. Oimata insists that the only thing other than the Demon Emperor they could care less about is Memori's existence. However, the goddess goes on her knees and begs them to save their world. Sogo asks how puny humans like them can do anything against the Demon Emperor, so the goddess explains that they have powers unlike any other beings in this world. The goddess calls for a demonstration, so the guard brings out a three-eyed dire wolf and a Ned Stark. They unleash the beast, and it goes straight for the head again, but while it feasts, the goddess casts a fireball spell that incinerates every trace of the beast. The students are horrified by this display, but finally understand they're in a different world. Next, the goddess asks them to step forward and discover what abilities they possess. One by one, the students stretch their hands to a crystal ball, and it glows a different color to determine what rank they fall into. However, when Takudo steps up to the measuring ball, the crystal breaks apart, impressing the goddess. She explains that he's a rarest rank, the most powerful of all, but the only thing that would get Takudo excited is his own reflection. The power rankings continue and Sogo is also ranked S-class, along with another girl. The goddess is stunned by how rare 3S ranks are and praises their good luck. Next up is Memori, but when he puts his hand on the orb, a dim purple color shows up. The goddess quickly asks for the next student, completely ignoring Memori as he tries to ask what rank he falls into. As Memori heads back, he hears a commotion and turns back to see Yasu's result. The goddess calls him the same as the Dark Hero, who was rumored to be the strongest, and Yasu is glad to finally catch his big break. Afterward, the students learn how to check their status and Memori confirms that he's even less useful than an NPC. However, he notices an inherent skill called abnormal state endowment, which allows him to paralyze and poison his enemies. Oimata tells the hot goddess to wrap up the lecture, so the simp teacher tells him to stop being rude, but Oimata reminds him that a D-rank deadbeat shouldn't be talking to an A rank. The goddess walks to the front of the class and announces an important ritual involving Memori. Memori is shoved forward as the goddess informs him that since he's an E rank, since weak squeaks like him tend to slow down the rest of the heroes, they're typically marked for disposal. However, the goddess explains that if they opt in right in front of the others, there would probably be some backlash, so he's being given another chance. He'll be sent to some abandoned ruins, and if manages to come back alive, will be given the right to live. Memori asks if it's a dangerous place, and she happily tells him that it's worse than the AOT universe, with almost 100% guaranteed fatality. Memori immediately tries to plead his case, saying he has an inherent skill called abnormal state endowment, but the goddess tells him his version has no value and would be useless on low-level demons. To add salt to injury, she tells him that his stats are too weak and he can't access some solo leveling hack either. Memori points out how messed up it is that she summoned him without consent, and now wants to eat him out, but Takudo interrupts and tells him to wrap it up since the girls are tired. The rest of the class agrees except Yasu, who extends an arm of comfort, like he always did when they were both at the bottom of the food chain. However, even that rat-faced Yasu turns on him and calls him a lowly E rank. The goddess activates the magic circle, to start the ritual and gives him a leather pocket as his unique item for being summoned. Sogo rushes to stop her, insisting that it's wrong to do this to their classmate. The goddess has no choice but to knock the brat right out and then tell the others to witness the pitiful side of the abandoned hero. Minmori is enraged by her words and tries to use his paralyze ability on her, but the weak power bounces off her dispel bubble, which is a permanent protective barrier around her. Minmori is devastated, but Takuto takes the spotlight away from him when he tries his draconic buster technique just to flex on what real power looks like. The time finally comes and the boys laugh at his pathetic exit, while the girls ask to get their beauty sleep. Minmori damns them all, but no one could care less, so the goddess asks for his last words. As the tears drop from his eyes, Minmori remembers his inner demon, telling him there was no point in pretending to be a good person. It was finally time to reveal his true nature. At that moment, Minmori switches up and tells the goddess to go to hell, and warns them all to be ready if he makes it back alive, as he vanishes. After, he finds himself in a place so dark that he can't open his status screen. He uses his leather pouch as a flashlight, and walks around till he stumbles on a pile of skeletons that have been split in half. Suddenly, a monster shows up behind him and tries to crack him open like a nut. Minmori runs for his miserable, pointless life, but the monster continues to chase after him. Minmori can feel its murderous intent, but he surprisingly doesn't feel scared. As he stares at the rotating buffalo head, he only remembers those evil bastards that sent him to his death, and all he feels is frustration. In a desperate attempt, Minmori uses his paralyze ability, and it surprisingly works, so he books it, wondering if that was a low-level demon or just a miracle. When it seems he's run far enough, he stops to get some air, only to face some mutated chicken wing demon who wants to peck his brains out. Minmori is determined not to die and uses his paralyze ability, relieved that it worked again. He opens his status screen and discovers that he's almost out of mana points. However, he uses his poison skill, which seems to work too, but it takes a long activation time. Just when Minmori thinks he's caught a break, the overcooked buffalo wing comes charging back now that the paralyzing effect has worn off. In the face of his impending death, Minmori thinks of everyone who's been a shit stain on his life, and he determines to lay waste to them all, starting with the demon barbecue menu in front of him. Now that Minmori is out of game MPs, he realizes he has to rely on his natural MP, but he has no idea what might happen to him once it runs out. Unfortunately, the screaming centaur couldn't care less and starts attacking. Minmori tries to use his paralyze skill once more, but the game system informs him that he can't apply the same skill on a target repeatedly. Thankfully, Minmori switches to his sleep ability, and then poisons it, which means he can at least stack abilities. Suddenly, more of these creepy demon chickens start showing up, but Minmori refuses to back down without a fight. He throws his pouch to inflict status ailment, but it's as effective as the pull-out method. He goes on a paralyzing spree, but after stopping the cluckers, he realizes he's almost out of his own MP too. More demon centaurs approach while Minmori starts to feel faint, so he figures his life was meaningless anyway, and he might as well go out while getting sucked dry. He uses his paralyze ability indiscriminately till he reaches his mental limit. Just before the centaurs have a taste of his juicy meat, one of the chicken wings finally cooks, and he receives a level up which restores his MP. With that, he realizes he can keep fighting, so he continues to paralyze till he levels up to level 2. Then he realizes he can now paralyze multiple targets at once, and stops all the monsters. Apparently the inflict status ailment didn't reach the ones at the back, so Minmori manually heads to poison all the monsters and add to his experience. As he sits down to take a breather, the demon minions start dying one by one, increasing his stats in the process. He levels up his sleep ability too, and the remaining monsters cut and run for it now that he's grown some balls. After, Minmori goes grave robbing and plans to find some food and water so he survives. Since he can't find anything better, he heads back to the chicken corpses and realizes he's got to do the unthinkable. He goes for their meat first, but it turns out it can get too hard, so he goes for the balls instead. They don't quite get the job done, and Minmori thinks he might die thirsty when he notices his pouch has changed color. When he looks inside, he finds cola and beef jerky, and he cries as it's the best stick of meat he's ever sucked on. Days go by and Minmori continues to get on by poisoning his prey, leveling up and sucking meat. He eventually starts to lose it, and remembers his depressing childhood, where he hoped to take out his own parents until his aunt and uncle came and saved him from becoming Sasuke. However, even though Minmori had tried to become like his relatives, after sucking down things he can't explain, he says he's even scared of himself. No matter, if he wants to survive, he has to accept the new version of himself. As he continues through the ruins, he finds more strange creatures, but he's able to take them out faster than before. He discovers a sealed room, and when he pours magic into it, he finds the skeletons of some dead lovers. Minmori prays they got it one last time, then he checks their bags and finds gems which might come in handy when he reaches the surface. Memori continues to go from room to room, grave robbing, till he gets to a special one that requires more MP to open. There he finds the corpse of a man who couldn't bag any deathbed babes. He finds a note in a language he can read, and it says his name was Anglin, the great sage, also known as the Hero of Darkness. Memori instantly remembers the goddess' words to Yasu. Apparently the goddess had sent Anglin there to rot when she no longer had use for him, so he entrusts the reader of the note with something that he desperately brought this far. As Memori searches his bag, he realizes the goddess really is an evil bitch. Not that he's any better himself. He finally finds a book of forbidden arts with recipes for medicine and magic tools, which might come in handy later. Next, he finds a scroll of forbidden magic, but it's in a language he can't understand. However, since the sage risked his life to bring it here, it must be a powerful spell that could help him clap the goddess. He takes one last look at that book and finds a warning about the Soul Eater, which is what took everyone's lives. Afterwards, Memori continues through the ruins, praying for any lost soul he finds till he finds an exit door that requires some kind of key. This means the Soul Eater must be somewhere close. Memori worries, since even the Hero of Darkness couldn't defeat it, but he hopes he's leveled up enough to defeat it. Suddenly, he notices a giant head sitting on the wall with an orb that's probably the key to opening the exit. He's finally found the Soul Eater, so he tries to use his ability, but before he can even get the words out, a laser cuts through his hand and stops him. Memori figures the beam must activate when it senses his intention to attack, but he needs to speak a skill before activating his abilities. With his busted hand and shit ability wrong game, Memori wonders what the hell he's supposed to do now. However, before he can think up some plot armor, the walls begin to break apart, and he realizes the Soul Eater is now coming for him. Meanwhile, a blonde bombshell appears to be running from something when she spots some ancient ruins and ironically runs to it for safety. Back inside the ruins, the floating demon head keeps inching closer till it stops and performs that demonic hawk tuah. The purple goo starts to take the shape of horrified humans, which are the souls of the humans that all died in the ruins. Memori knows the sadistic head thingy is just waiting to see how he reacts, and just then, the face shoots through the wall and lets out a loud scream as it opens wide for some action. Memori paralyzes the goo monsters and watches as the large head gets off on watching him suffer. He tries to use his poison ability when he suddenly grows a conscience and fails to activate it. He laments not wanting to use his own abilities on humans just like him and insists that he's better than monsters like it. As he continues to lose it, the monster simply spits up more souls to devour him. Memori backs away as he begs the goo humans to stop, while the demon goes on some acid trip just from watching Memori cower in despair. Memori becomes more and more pitiful as he screams for help and cries in the process, till he finally uses his paralyze ability on the surprised head. Memori explains that the creature had been too busy climaxing that it let its guard down, and didn't even notice that he never lowered his left arm. Now the demon is the one in despair as Memori mocks it for being too arrogant in its strength. He levels up and explains that he's been putting on Oscar-worthy performances all his life just to convince himself he was kind and normal. But now, he intends to give back what others dish out and crush anyone who stands in his way. As the demon starts to die from his poison ability, Memori taunts it for letting a weak-ass human deceive it. He finally puts the demons and the lost souls out of their misery and levels up in the process. Suddenly, orbs of light start to move as the trapped souls of the ruins appear and congratulate him on making it out alive. They thank him for defeating the monster and wish him good luck when the Hero of Darkness appears and tells him to clap that goddess at all costs. The souls disappear and Memori grabs the orb, promising to make that goddess pay someday. Finally, Memori reaches the exit and inserts the key which opens it up. He says his last goodbye and walks out a free man. Meanwhile, the other students are out in the woods, slaying monsters with the likes of Takudo reaching level 18, while there's Yasu, who's enjoying being a cokehead pyro kid. One of the girls named Kobedo chickens out, so Asagi approaches her and warns her she'll die if she doesn't toughen up. By her calculations, the rest of the class is likely to fall apart thanks to the conflicting egos and shitty ranking system. Asagi informs her she's a B rank, and since Kobedo is a measly D rank, she's better off joining her ranks since the elites won't accept a useless waste of space. Asagi predicts the other classmates' pairings and says Sogo's most likely to die, so she insists Kobedo's best option is to join her. Asagi slips her hand onto Kobedo's external lung and assures her she can at least put it to good use if her abilities suck. Kobedo is too scared to talk, so Asagi signals her girls to bring out a half-dead monster to help Kobedo clear the test set by the goddess. Asagi assures her their group plans to level up together and tells her to slay the beast unless she wants to end up like Memori. Since being compared to Memori is a fate worse than death, Kobedo does the deed and defeats the monster. Asagi welcomes her to the team and walks off, but Kobedo begins to cry as she remembers a time when she found an injured cat and Memori was the one who saved it. Kobeto cries that she wasn't able to help Memori when she needed him. At the same time, Sogo wakes up with a pain in her gut that reminds her of that bitch goddess who almost punched a hole in her, and she realizes what must have happened to Memori. Later, she appears before the goddess who apologizes for Memori's disposal, explaining that it's their kingdom's strict policy. After pretending to shed tears, the goddess informs Sogo that she has no time to mourn. While she was sleeping for days, the rest of the class left on a test to determine if they could defeat monsters. However, those who couldn't do it were disqualified, and since they suck, they'll have to be disposed of. Sogo figures out that they're trying to cull the weak, but the goddess insists that's just the policy. Sogo tells her she doesn't agree with their sick rules, but the goddess is barely bothered about the rantings of some Mikasa wannabe. Sogo suggests that since S ranks are valuable to the kingdom, she'll use her abilities to make up for the students who couldn't clear the test so they can avoid disposal. The goddess praises her proposal and extends a handshake to settle their differences and apologized for that vile gut punch earlier. They shake on it, and the goddess airs her high hopes for Sogo, but when Sogo leaves, she notices how cold the goddess felt. Back in the dark forest, the blonde girl from earlier is now on the run since she failed to enter the ruin. She's being chased by a group of men called the Holy Watchers who've been tracking the Princess Knight relentlessly. The men argue on whether they should take her out immediately or take turns taking her for a ride, but ultimately, they'll need to catch her first. Meanwhile, Memori finally sees the sun for the first time since he got on that doomsday bus. He checks his stats, and though his level is over 1,000, only his magical points are over 50,000. He can also dismiss his abilities now and make his poison non-lethal, so he plans to practice on any monsters he sees nearby. As Memori walks through the forest, he suddenly hears a strange noise and goes to check it out. There he finds a group of slime balls ganging up on the tiniest one. Memori looks sad that the tiny snot bubble has no choice till he sees it fighting back. Memori steps in and paralyzes them, then inflicts his poison ability next. He sets it to non-lethal, and then dismisses Paralyze for all the big ones so they can run off. Before releasing the Tyrion Lannister of the group, he explains he has no intention of harming it and apologizes for not helping out sooner. However, he praises it for sticking up for itself and tells it not to attack once it can move. After releasing it, Memori heads on his way, but the snot bubble follows after him. Memori asks if it plans to keep following him when he realizes it's an outcast just like him. Eventually, Memori adopts the slime and tells it to be the eyes at the back of his head. He checks out the Forbidden Art book and sees experiments that can strengthen monsters, even slimes. Memori tells the slime that his journey is one of vengeance and asks it if it really wants to follow down that path, but it's not like it has anything better to do. At that, Memori names it Pigimar, not to be confused with Rimaru, who's actually useful. Then they set out on their journey. Meanwhile, the unholy Wastman continue to gain on the princess, forcing her to prepare to fight as she calls on the spirits and readies her blade. The Wastmen stumble on Memori instead, and when they see he looks scrawny enough to break into two, they tell him to drop all his valuables so they can spare him. But the purple one insists on taking him out just so he can test his weapon. None of the guys protest as they start daydreaming of the unfortunate girls they plan on harassing later in the day, starting with the one they're chasing down. Memori tries to back away from the plot-crazy men, but they catch onto him and stop him from leaving. Memori tries to beg while raising his arm, but his voice sounds like tiger claws on a chalkboard and only causes the man to attack. However, Memori activates his Paralyze skill, which thankfully works, meaning it's only useless on the goddess. While the men are frozen in place, he tells them they're nothing compared to Pennywise's cousin he encountered in the ruin. The slime agrees that the men are all scumbags, and Memori concludes that he'll be meeting hostility with hostility from now on, which means even humans are fair game. The men all give their last mugshot poses before Memori activates his poison skill. After corpse robbing as usual, Memori senses the presence of someone nearby. At the same time, the blonde princess feels their presence disappear and wonders if it's a trick till she senses someone else in the area. Though their presence isn't that strong, there's something creepy about it, like Hisoka vibes. The girl tries to attack, causing the slime to hide while Memori paralyzes her from behind. Memori says he's curious and would like to have a conversation with her while she's frozen in place. He explains that he's not from around here and needs her to fill him in, so he uses his ability to free up her head so she can speak freely. Before she answers his question, she asks what happened to the cultured foursome, so Memori says they're probably harassing the devil right about now. The girl asks if he took care of them by himself or had help from some allies, but Memori refuses to reveal his ally. She tells him she believes his answers so far, and Memori realizes how confident she sounds for someone stuck in a Superman pose. After questioning her, Memori learns that he's in an entirely different kingdom now, so he pulls out the magic scroll and asks if she knows anything about it. She tells him she can't read it either but might know someone who can. She recommends someone called the Witch of Taboos who was driven from her homeland, and should now be in the land of golden-eyed monsters. Minora thanks her for the tip and calls them even. But then he realizes how much she reminds him of his aunt, who was so nice that it was concerning. He informs her she'll be free in a few moments and wishes her safe travels as he walks away. Piggymoru follows after him and Minori explains that he won't slaughter people for no reason, but he asks Piggymoru to keep watch just in case the woman comes after him. They agree to be partners and head forward together. That's it for this video. Comment paralyze if you want part 4, and if you like anime recaps like this, then watch this video over here.